When the 1999 500 World Motocross Championship opened at Castelnau-de-Levis in France, few would have picked Yamaha's Andrea Bartolini as a title contender. The more likely candidate would have been Bartolini's teammate, twice world champion Alex Pizarre. German Bert Eckenbach was one of Husqvarna's title hopes for '99. And Frenchman Yves de Maria had exchanged 250 Kawasaki's for Husqvarna's four-stroke. But Husqvarna's best hopes lay with New Zealander Darrell King. King, racing for former world champion Jackie Martins, was determined to improve on his second place in 1998.
Definitely, yeah, there's no reason why not. Second to me, yeah, I'm the first loser basically, and yeah, my dream is to be world champion, has been for a long time. We just haven't put the perfect season together yet, and I think this year with the combination we've got with the bike and myself working together and the team motivated and, you know, having a couple of good teammates.
But what did King think of the new riders in the 500 class?
Yeah, it is. It's going to be really exciting, you know, like Demaria and Carlson and Parker and Puza and plenty of others. It's going to make the class awesome.
KTM boss Kurt Nickel had signed Peter Johansson to develop the Austrian company's new four-stroke. Former world champion Shane King was also brought in by KTM to help with development work.
Well, winning the title's not really my aim this year with the new bike, but I want to finish on the podium. If I can finish third, I'll be happy. Second, I'd be stoked. First, I'd be just over the moon. So, you know, I want to finish on the podium this year, and I think we've got a bike now that's capable of doing it. So that's my main goal, and I'm just going to take each race as it comes and enjoy myself and have some fun.
Swede Joachim Karlsson was another of the new men in the 500s, where he and teammate Rob Herring were mounted on the 500 Hondas. Trampus Parker wanted to add the 500 title to his 125 and 250 crowns. But the man they all wanted to beat was reigning world champion Joel Smets, who'd been injured for the 5 months before the season got underway with a broken arm.
The first few races never are too important, I think, but the only thing where they can be important for is mentally. So if you do really bad and riding just doesn't work, maybe it can work on your mental shape. It's for sure still my ambition to keep that #1 plate on my bike, and the way I feel now, I really think I should be able to keep that #1.
Well, despite his injury layoff, Smets looked in fine shape going into the first Grand Prix at Castelnau. But could he start the season off with a win? With so many strong riders in the class, any one of 10 competitors were challengers for the first race win of the season. But when the gate dropped on the first race of what promised to be a great season, the home fans had plenty to cheer about as De Maria was quickest off the start. But the Frenchman was beaten to the first turn by British rider Christian Burnham on his 500 Honda. De Maria soon claimed the lead and looked well placed to get his season off to a winning start. But Shane King and Smets were well placed as their four-strokes quickly exerted their authority over the two-stroke machines, which were struggling for grip. Bartolini hadn't had the best of starts and was fighting to get by Carlson. De Maria looked to be having it all his own way as he stretched out a lead. King and Smets were locked in a battle for second position. But their fight took them to within striking distance of De Maria, so perhaps the result was far from decided. But when King lost that battle with Smets, he slipped back towards the chasing pack of riders, which included his teammate Carlson. Bartolini's teammate Pizarre was making his way through the field, making short work of Johansson. The lead changed hands when Smets made his way past De Maria, who was getting encouragement from the crowd. Then Carlson made a mistake in a turn that allowed Bartolini to make up a place. Smets looked in good shape to take a victory, but perhaps he knew something when he said he wasn't going to push hard in the early stages. His mistake in the same corner as Carlson put De Maria back in the lead. Johansson also slipped up in the same corner. When Smet set about catching up with Demaria, he found he had Pizar, the fastest man on the track, for company. The action was really heating up. When Pizar made a spectacular pass on Smets, even the lead Demaria held looked to be under threat. Herring was the latest rider to make a mistake in the tricky turn. Pizar kept the pressure on Demaria, and Smets stayed close enough to benefit from any mistake by the leading pair. But Demaria held on as the race reached a thrilling conclusion. It was going to take something spectacular to take the lead away from the Frenchman. And that's just what Pizar provided, as he went for a pass on Demaria over the same jump he got by Smets. Demaria fought back, but Pizar managed to make the pass stick as they went through the next corner. It looked like Smets might get a chance to take second place away from Demaria. Demaria was still hanging on, and it was difficult to see where Smets would be able to make a telling pass. Pizar was able to celebrate the first race win of the season. Demaria just held off a late challenge from Smets, whose bike hit trouble as he crossed the line, leaving the world champion wondering what had gone wrong.
Yeah, for me it's good because after the start, maybe 8th position, winner. Today is okay. It's very strong, the 500cc, but for the moment it's okay.
In order to repeat his first race win, Pizar would need a good start in the second moto. And that's just what he got as he swept through the first turn with Demaria, these two leaving clouds of dust behind them. Demaria held the lead, but it promised to be an exciting race as Pizar, Bartolini and Smets filled the next 3 places. Demaria had no chance to relax as Pizar looked hungry for another victory. But with Bartolini also in close attendance, the race promised to be every bit as exciting as the first moto. Smets and Johansson were involved in a fight for 4th place. The way the race was shaping up, it was clear to see and also hear that the 4-strokes were going to dominate the season. Husqvarna won the title in '93 with Jackie Martins, but Demaria's hopes to repeat that title victory would be threatened by Yamaha on this evidence. Husaberg had enjoyed title success with Smets, and Johansson was giving notice of KTM's new 4-stroke threat. Next came Herring in 6th on the first 2-stroke in the race. Demaria would have to be at his best to hold off the challenge of Pizar. These two were setting such a pace that they pulled away from the chasing Bartolini. Pizar made the most of his chance when a lapped rider got in Demaria's way, but the Italian had to go wide and Demaria calmly retook the lead. A lead he'd been made to fight hard to keep as Pizar tried to pass over the same jump as the first race. Demaria held on to take his first race win of the season and also the overall victory. It was a great way for the Frenchman to start the season in front of his home fans, who gave him deserved applause. Bartolini had to be content with 3rd place in the second race. Pizar had tied Demaria on points, losing the overall win on the second race result. So Demaria stood on top of the podium. The Frenchman held the championship lead along with Pizar, but Smets was well placed in 3rd ahead of Bartolini and Carlson. The championship moved to Osuna in Spain for round 2, with Smets looking for his first race win, where Bartolini was also looking to record his first race win of the season, as was KTM's Trampus Parker.
Difficult start last week with the French track, but better for you today?
I hope so. I don't want to say anything before I get around the first turn. Let's just wait till after the moto and discuss what happens.
And the two-stroke, how competitive is it against the four strokes?
I think it all depends on the rider, and I wasn't the rider last week, but the bike's plenty capable of winning. I just got to give it more gas.
Well, good luck today.
Thanks a lot.
98 en la categoría de 2,5. Este año en el 500 va.
Brothers Darrell and Shane King were also looking to break their duck with a win in Asuna. Puzard knew a repeat of his win in France would put him clear in the championship. But heavy watering of a dry track made the conditions difficult. A good start would be important if a rider was to challenge for the win in race 1. Parker got that good start as he led the pack through the first corner. Parker was making up for his poor showing in France, leaving those behind him to cope with the mud. Puzard and Herring were caught up in a first corner crash. Puzard finally got going, but Herring's race ended right there. Parker was making the most of being at the front and tried his best to pull away from Demaria and Smets, who were leading the chase. Darrell King came next, but he couldn't afford to relax as he had both Johansson and Bartolini for company. Parker started to stretch out a lead, and there looked little Demaria could do to stop him. The American was clearly a master of the conditions at Asuna. Demaria had to cope with pressure from Smets. Johansson had made his way past King, and the New Zealander was struggling with both the mud and the threat posed by Bartolini. None of this concerned Parker as he blasted his way to a comfortable win, showing all the skill that had won his 2 world titles. Demaria still had Smets to cope with, but at least the Frenchman was pulling clear of Puzard in the title race. Johansson was making lonely progress in 4th. King was continuing to hold off Bartolini as they battled over 5th place. But the race win looked less certain for Parker as he was caught by Demaria and Smets. There was going to be more drama before the result was certain, as both the Frenchman or Belgian were close enough to take the race win away from the American. Demaria had tasted victory in France and wanted it here again in Spain. As he pressed hard, there looked every chance Parker would lose the lead. But the American wasn't going to give up without a real fight. Even if that meant pushing to his limit to stay in front of the Frenchman. Parker managed to pull away, and that left Demaria open to attack from Smets. The world champion made his move when he dived past going into a corner, but it ended in disaster when both he and Demaria were sent crashing to the ground. Demaria was the quicker to get going again. Looking back at that incident, as Smets made the pass, he clipped Demaria's front wheel, and they both went down. Smets hit other problems before this eventful race was over. So Parker became the 3rd different winner in as many races. But the American didn't allow himself an elaborate celebration. 2nd place meant Demaria was championship leader all on his own. Smets had to settle for 3rd after his pass on Demaria failed to come off. Parker had been off the pace in France in the opening Grand Prix, but here in Spain he was in the money once more. Race 2 would present Parker with another shot at victory, as long as he was fast out of the gate once more. A repeat looked on the cards as the American took another hole shot. But this time he had Smets and Bartolini for company. With the track drier for the 2nd race, it was going to be harder for Parker to win again. But the American was giving it everything he had. Only for Smets to show that he wasn't going to settle for anything less than a race win this time out. And when the world champion hit the front, there looked to be little chance of the American coming back at him. With Smets through in the lead, it was De Maria's turn to put Parker under pressure. As the Belgian started to edge away, De Maria passed Parker as the drying track presented a choice of lines. But even third wasn't safe, as Bartolini was the next rider with Parker in his sights. Then De Maria slid off on a corner, throwing away his hard work as Parker and Bartolini went by. Smets was in a mood to win, and the mistakes of his rivals meant he was able to pull clear. Bartolini also had his sights on victory, and he was a step closer after passing Parker. That meant the American's best hope was third place, but only if he didn't lose any more positions before the race ended. He was clearly struggling as both De Maria and Johansson started to close in on their four-strokes. Carlson was trying to hold on to his top 5 spot in the point standings, but had Daryl King and Puzar closing in on him. After his first race crash, Puzar needed to score well in this race to stay in touch with the championship leader, De Maria. Smets had started the season coming off an injury and wasn't expecting to win races this early in the campaign. But there was no way the world champion was going to turn down this victory. And he celebrated in his usual exuberant fashion. Bartolini continued to pick up points, which would serve him well later in the season. Smets shared his delight with the crowd. After 4 races, Smets was the 4th winner, and his win in the second race gave him the overall in Spain over Parker. Victory had also put Smets into the championship lead, but his lead was only 9 points over De Maria and Bartolini. Round 3 took the championship to Schwanenstadt in Austria, where the Austrian-built KTMs of Johansson and Shane King would be among the favourites for victory. Well, not if De Maria had his way. The Frenchman leading his title rival Bartolini through the first corner. Bartolini's chances in the race suffered a blow as both Smets and Herring got by the Italian in the first half lap. Spaniard Garcia Vico spoiled his own chances when he lost control of his Yamaha. De Maria looked on top form as he led the field, with Smets, Herring and Bartolini heading the pursuit. British rider Herring was putting in one of his best performances of the season. De Maria was coming under pressure, and his hold on the lead looked under serious threat from the following riders. Parker looked well placed to enjoy more success, but the KTMs of Shane King and Johansson were struggling in mid-pack. Then Smets' bike started to hit trouble, and that allowed De Maria to pull ahead. Herring was able to go by the world champion, and the rest of the field started to stream by as the Husaberg struggled up the hills. Herring was enjoying his best form of the season. That was ironic, as teammate Carlson would go out of this Grand Prix with a broken kneecap and be out for several months. Puzar had started the season with a bang, but was again struggling in Austria. But even he eventually passed Smets. 3 riders started to pull away, and it quickly became clear that the race winner would be De Maria, Herring or Bartolini. Herring was putting pressure on De Maria, but Bartolini was so close that he had to be a contender. Daryl King had a firm grip on at least 4th place. But Johansson's hopes of a home win for KTM went up in a cloud of smoke. The challenge to De Maria then came from Bartolini, who'd taken 2nd off Herring. Bartolini then went into the lead, and De Maria also left the door open for Herring to move on up into 2nd place. Bartolini looked good for a race win, but the battle still went on between Herring and Demaria over second place. Bartolini was set to become the 5th different winner this season, provided he could stay ahead of his pursuers. Well, his team clearly thought he would win. Their faith in Bartolini was justified as he crossed the line ahead of a happy Herring and the disappointed Demaria. But not as disappointed as Smets, who couldn't explain what had happened. Also disappointed was Buzar, whose title hopes were suffering. At least race 2 would present the Italian with a second shot at victory. But not if he wasn't leading through the first corner. Buzar suffered more misery when a faulty exhaust valve stopped him on the start straight. Demaria again had the lead, but this time Shane King and Johansson were able to give the home fans something to cheer about. Bartolini and Smets were having to fight their way through. Buzar was left a dejected spectator. King was proving that the KTM 4-stroke was a competitive bike. Even if Johansson had suffered mechanical problems in race 1, the Swede was up to 3rd this time out. King looked set for a morale-boosting victory for the Austrian factory. Johansson could make it a 1-2 for KTM. Smets and Bartolini had work to do if they were to get on terms with the leading pair. Johansson was the fastest rider on the track, so perhaps he would be challenging his teammate before the race was over. Smets wanted to make up for his race 1 disaster, and when he passed Bernd Eckenbach, he was up to 3rd place. There'd be no repeat for Herring, as he wasn't near the front this time. King's lead was coming under real threat from Johansson as the Swede forced the pace. It was what the home crowd wanted to see, 2 KTMs at the front. Johansson's pace eventually told as he took over the lead from his teammate. Then disaster struck as the leader slowed dramatically. That handed the race lead, and with it the victory back to King, who was about to become the 6th winner this season. Smets found himself in 2nd, but he had first race winner Bartolini in his tyre tracks. Johansson could only sit and watch the race go by, with his teammate King at the front. Smets had also moved up to take over 2nd spot, but he had to hope his bike wouldn't break down this time, with Bartolini still close behind him. Austrian Erwin Mattlinger was fighting off the challenge of Parker. But Belgian Danny Thibers couldn't hold off British rider Christian Burnham, who forced his way past. Thibers also had to contend with the challenge of Demaria, who didn't want to lose too many points to Smets and Bartolini. Any thoughts King had of taking it easy must have disappeared when Smets started to get close. Whatever problem Smets had in the first race must have been fixed as he was closing in. Demaria showed how determined he was when he forced his way past Burnham. But Demaria's work was undone when he stalled his bike in a rut. The Frenchman was unable to restart his Husqvarna and retired. That retirement could prove costly by the end of the season. King gave the Austrians a home victory for the new KTM, giving the 4-stroke a win in only its 6th Grand Prix race. Bartolini took the overall victory, with only Smets of his championship challengers in the top 5 in Austria. That meant the Italian had taken over the lead in the championship, getting his title challenge underway. Demaria was the fastest qualifier for round 4 in Italy. Castiglione del Lago was the venue for what promised to be an exciting Grand Prix, with the home fans looking to Bartolini for victory. The new championship leader had been fast in qualifying. The Italian wanted to back that up with a win in his home Grand Prix. But Johansson was another rider keen to do well in Italy. The Swedish rider had suffered heartache in Austria when mechanical problems robbed him of a certain race win. But his hopes of a race win would come under real scrutiny, as both Smets and Puzar were in touch with the early race leader. Johansson would need to be on his best form to win on this track. The hopes of the fans for a home win lay with Puzar, as Bartolini was riding hard just to stay with the leaders. Johansson clung onto the lead, but Smets and Puzar both had a chance of winning after both getting good starts. Puzar, who like Johansson had suffered problems in Austria, saw his hopes of winning on home soil fade as the leading pair pulled away. With Di Maria and Bartolini closing in from behind, Puzar's grip on third place also looked in doubt. Johansson needed to keep up a good pace as Smets was keeping the pressure on. Puzar also needed to be on top form as Di Maria and Bartolini were also closing in on their prey. Herring saw his chances of a good finish fade when he slid off on one of the corners. But a mistake by Smets let Johansson get clear. The Belgian had to watch out as both Puzar and Bartolini, who had passed Di Maria, were close enough to attempt a passing move. In what was turning out to be one of the most competitive seasons in memory, Johansson was set to be the 7th winner in as many races. The home fans had something to cheer about as both Puzar and Bartolini had passed Smets. Was the Husaberg machine again starting to hit trouble? The problem in Austria had been diagnosed as electrical. Well, whatever it was, Smets was suffering again in Italy. Puzar and Bartolini both took advantage of the misfortune of Smets. Di Maria was next to challenge the world champion, who was clearly struggling. And the King brothers, Shane and Darrell, also looked set to close in on the Belgian. Johansson eased up, but was far enough ahead of Puzar to take the win. Johansson made it a magnificent 7 for the 500 class as he celebrated his race win. Puzar and Bartolini had chased him home, and the championship leader stopped to congratulate the Swedish rider. Both Di Maria and Bartolini were determined to stop Johansson winning in race 2. There was nothing the Italian fans wanted more than to see Puzar or Bartolini step to the top of the podium. A good start was the first thing either of them needed to make that happen. But neither was able to better the start of Smets and Johansson, who led over the first tabletop jump. If either of the first two won, they'd be the first rider to record a second victory this season. Herring went out in a first corner crash, but not for the first time. Bartolini wanted that second win for himself, and he showed how determined he was to get it with an aggressive pass on Smets. But the Belgian wasn't going to give in easily. He fought back and chased the Italian hard as they battled for the lead. Puzar found himself fighting from the back, and there was no chance of matching his first race result. Looking back to the first corner, we can see the crash which claimed Herring and Puzar, but which the leaders avoided. Bartolini started to pull away as Smets looked to have no answer to the Italian. The Italian fans wanted a home winner, and that's just what the Yamaha rider was giving them as he stretched out his lead over Smets. Johansson was continuing his good work of the first race in third, and Darrell King was again showing why he finished last season in second place. But things weren't going so well for his brother Shane in this race. longer Bartolini held the lead, the more he enhanced his chances of being title contender for the first time in his career. Smets was the obvious man to prevent Bartolini from becoming a world champion. De Maria's title hopes had looked good at the start of the season, but he couldn't afford to slip up in Italy like he had in Austria. The four-stroke Yamaha, in its second Grand Prix season, was looking every inch a winner. And the new KTM was also looking good, as Johansson proved when he went by Smets on the Husaberg, already a world title winner. Daryl King could do little to close the gap on the leaders. But one rider doing himself no harm was the improving Spaniard Garcia Vico. De Maria's progress was being slowed by Gert-Jan van Dorn, making a rare appearance on the Vertemati. Daryl's brother Shane wasn't repeating his form from Austria. He was falling into the clutches of Puzar as the Italian fought back from his first lap disaster. Bartolini recorded his second race win of the season, making him the first rider this season to win 2 races. Johansson took the overall victory in Italy with second place. Smets came home in third, then stopped for a handshake with the Swedish rider. So Bartolini climbed to the top of the podium for the second time this season, to the delight of his Italian fans. Johansson edged Bartolini by 2 points for the overall victory in Italy, with Puzar taking third. Bartolini had stretched his championship lead to 25 points over Smets. Loket was the venue for the Czech Grand Prix, round 5 of the series. Johansson had moved up to 5th in the series, but needed to maintain his progress in this race. Parker's title hopes were fading. Finland's Miska Aaltonen had set fastest time in qualifying at Loket, and that allowed him the pick of the starting gate ahead of Shane King and Bartolini. Well, the Italian was the man everyone wanted to beat, as Bartolini had started to stretch out a lead in the points table. And if he won in Loket, that would let him open up an even bigger gap in the race for the World Championship. Well, race officials dropped the gate too quickly, catching out many of the riders and prompting protests from the team managers. Bartolini had made the perfect start and had a good advantage by the end of lap 1. Smets was holding second spot, but came under attack from Daryl King, who forced his way past with an aggressive move. Looking back down the field, Herring hadn't got off to the best of starts and had his work cut out. Bartolini already looked to be in control of the race as he carved out an impressive lead. Smets' hope of catching him had been hit when King went by. Puzar was fighting a lonely battle and was finding it hard to repeat his form of the first race in Italy. Parker, like Puzar, had won a race this season, but was also finding it hard to repeat the victory. Aaltonen hadn't turned his fast qualifying time into a leading position. Herring picked up 1 place when he went through on the inside of Italian Max Bartolini. Another Italian, Andrea Bartolini, was having no such problems as he continued to pull away. In this sort of form, Bartolini was making people sit up and take notice. He was establishing his world title credentials. Daryl King was starting to hit his best form, but Smets badly needed to match Bartolini's pace. Disaster struck once more for Smets as a bad misfire slowed his bike. Husaberg engineers thought it was an electrical problem, but whatever it was had given Puzar a sniff of third place. Smets was left to try pushing his bike back to the work area. So Bartolini was able to record his third win of the season and further stretch his championship lead over his rivals. Second was the best result of the season so far for Daryl King. So it was first and third for the Yamaha team. Demario's bike needed some last-minute adjustments before the start of the second race. But the Frenchman was ready to take his place on the line, along with Bartolini and Johansson. As race 2 got underway, there was real drama. As riders got tangled up in the first corner, some were forced to go wide and went the wrong way around the track. Smets was in this group and he faced a difficult race if he was to come back from that position. Eckenbach had avoided all the trouble and was leading the race from Herring, who was also quick out of the gate. As the rest of the field came into sight, it was a long time before Smets came into view, but already the world champion had made up several places. Eckenbach hadn't featured at the front of a race before this season and was determined to make the most of his good start as he led from Herring. Bartolini was next, but he had Shane King close behind. Eckenbach continued to lead, and he was at the head of a group of 6 who pulled away from the field. Demario and Johansson had managed to tag onto the back of the leading quartet. Herring was starting to close in on Eckenbach, and it looked like the Honda rider had set his sights on going one better than he had in Austria. Bartolini was holding on to third, but was under pressure from Demario after the Frenchman had passed Shane King. Smets had continued to make ground, and he was closing in on the leaders. Demario was obviously setting a hot pace as he forced his way into the lead. Bartolini was close behind in second place, but both had got by Eckenbach and Herring, who were now in third and fourth. Smets was also on fire, still blasting his way through the field. Demario looked on course for his second race win of the season, but that meant staying in front of Bartolini, who was hungry for his fourth victory. Smets had forced his way into third place after passing Herring, who'd finally got by Eckenbach. But things were still far from right with the Husaberg. The misfire was back and Smets had to resort to desperate measures to cool his bike down. He pulled into the pits where team members were waiting to pour water over the engine, but their cure looked far from convincing. Demario could be thankful that there were no problems with his Husqvarna as he took a well-earned win. Bartolini came home second, and that meant he kept control over the championship. Aaltonen had battled through to take third place from tiring Herring in the closing stages of the race. For Bartolini and his mechanic, it had been another successful day. Bartolini had taken another overall victory, this time ahead of Demario, Daryl King, Aaltonen and Herring. This meant the Italian led Demario by 44 points. Smets had slipped back to 5th position. Smets was at least still able to smile, as the World Championship moved on to Germany. Bartolini set the fastest qualifying time at Tuchenthal, ahead of Johansson and Dutchman Van Doorn, with Demario the 4th rider to come to the line. But could any of them stop the Italian pulling further away in the championship? Johansson was one rider who needed a good result if he was to make a championship challenge. Perhaps he'd get that result here in Germany. Johansson looked good for that win as he led the field through the first corner. It was just what the Swedish rider needed if he was to close the gap on Bartolini. Johansson had Smets close behind him, but was the Husaberg going to last the race? The latest theory was that the misfire was being caused by the fuel vaporizing. Whatever the problem, it didn't hamper Smets early in the race as he tracked Johansson and stayed clear of the rest of the field. Johansson and Smets were starting to take control of the race, but Daryl King lost control when he slid off his Husqvarna. The New Zealander's bike was nearly hit by Bartolini, and several other riders just missed King and his bike. It was some time before he was able to recover his fallen machine. Although back in the race, King was clearly shaken by his accident. So much so, he had to pull out of the race. At the front of the race, the battle raged on as Smets kept the pressure on Johansson in a bid to make him crack. Smets' persistence paid off as he hit the front. In this mood, it looked likely nobody could live with the world champion. But as the battle for the lead continued, Bartolini had settled into a steady rhythm and looked set to add to his world championship lead. To stop Bartolini pulling further away in the title race, Smets needed to win this race. But Johansson and Bartolini had other ideas. Demaria's title chances were starting to fade, but taking fourth place here would do him some good, as long as he could hold off Herring. Smets was starting to come under pressure from Johansson, and Bartolini was waiting in the wings. Then Johansson saw his chance to take the lead and dived under Smets to make his pass in a corner. But the Swedish rider's back wheel made contact with the front wheel of Smets' bike, and the world champion was sent crashing to the floor. It seemed an eternity before Smets finally got his bike going again. He managed to stay ahead of Demaria, but Bartolini had already gone past. Bartolini also saw his chance to pounce and put the pressure on the new race leader, Johansson. Smets had dropped back to third because of Johansson's aggressive move, and even third place now came under attack as Demaria closed right up on the Belgian. Johansson managed to hold off Bartolini and was fast becoming the Italian's most serious competition in the title race. The Swedish rider was happy with his race win. Bartolini had settled for second place, and Smets finally surrendered third to Demaria. As Smets crossed the line, he made a point of telling Johansson what he thought of the move that had put him to the ground and taken away the race win. Johansson was looking for another win in race 2. In order to do that, the KTM rider would need to make another good start and also avoid problems such as crashes in the first corner. A mistake by Puzar caused one such pile-up, which the Italian rider was lucky to escape, but not so lucky was his teammate Bartolini, and also Daryl King, who eventually emerged from the dust. Johansson and Demaria emerged as the leaders, and Smets looked well placed for revenge as he muscled his way past Herring and into the top 5 on the opening lap. Bartolini had picked himself off the ground and was trying to make up lost time and fight his way into the top 10. Van Dorn went out of the race after an early crash. Demaria had taken over the lead from Johansson, and Burnham had moved up to third spot, but he was to come under pressure from Smets, who held fourth ahead of Puzar and Herring. Demaria was clearly enjoying being in the lead and looked odds-on a winner. The Frenchman's hopes of winning the race were to come under threat, but it was Smets who was to pose the threat after he'd worked his way past Johansson into second place. Demaria had taken a place off Smets late in race 1, but this time the roles were reversed as the Frenchman began to feel the heat. It looked like just a matter of time before Smets took away the lead and made up for his first race misfortune. Bartolini was still making his way through the field, picking up valuable World Championship points along the way. It seemed almost inevitable that Smets would end up leading. So it came as no surprise to the German crowd that the Belgian put the #1 plate at the front of the field for the second time that day, leaving Johansson, his first race nemesis, to occupy a lonely third place. Bartolini's progress through the pack took him past Shane King, earning the World Championship leader more points. Smets was adding to his lead over De Maria. Surely nothing would stop the world champion picking up a much-deserved win. It would be too cruel for the world champion to have his bike break down once more, robbing him of yet another race victory, even if Smets looked to be trying too hard, almost coming to grief when his bike's back wheel kicked out. Bartolini continued to show a lot of heart, even though the race was drawing to a close. His pass on Burnham meant the damage done to his championship lead would be as small as possible. Smets' bike kept going, and he was able to celebrate a much welcome race win as he crossed the line ahead of De Maria. Third place meant Johansson would take overall victory. The Swede took it easy as he crossed the line, with Herring the next rider to come home in fourth. Johansson's reward was a cool drink of water, followed by a trip to the top step of the podium. Johansson took the overall win from Smets by 2 points, with De Maria 1 point further back. Bartolini had fought hard for fourth overall. That meant the Italian held a 35-point lead over De Maria at the halfway point in the season. The British Grand Prix at Hawkstone Park was round 7 of 13. This race would be a real test of Bartolini's championship pedigree, as the sandy conditions weren't to his liking. But as long as the Italian got a good start, he wouldn't have a lot to worry about. Bartolini grabbed the whole shot, but Johansson was at the front before the end of the first lap. Bartolini was in second, and third was wildcard rider Neil Prince on a track less than half an hour's drive from his front door. Johansson was trying to build on his lead and pull away from Bartolini, but Prince's hold on third place was under pressure from De Maria and Smets. Johansson was putting a little distance between himself and Bartolini, but Prince had a new challenger to fight off in the form of Smets. The Belgian had got past De Maria and had the Welshman firmly in his sights. Bartolini had performed well in every race so far this season, and the Italian wasn't going to let Johansson get away without a fight. Smets had got past Prince and set about chasing the leaders. The Welshman was left to deal with the challenge posed by De Maria. The following pack of riders included Herring and Burnham, who were both riding well on their home Grand Prix. Johansson looked favourite to win the race, but Bartolini was showing that he wasn't so out of place on this type of track. Johansson and Bartolini were starting to pull clear and were looking good at this stage for first and second places. Unless Smets could do anything about wearing down their advantage. De Maria was another rider not expected to do well in these conditions, but he was also defying his critics like Bartolini. The Frenchman looked safe in fourth place and was well placed to take advantage if any of his rivals slipped up. Herring had taken over from Prince as the top British rider in the race and was giving the home fans plenty to cheer about. Not everything was good for KTM, as Shane King was forced to retire from the race. That left Johansson as the only four-stroke KTM rider left in the race, but he was doing a good job for his team, adding to his lead over Bartolini. Then disaster struck for the Italian. He had crashed off his bike at the top of the hill and had to retire when he couldn't restart his machine. That left Johansson in the clear, as his mechanic pointed out. But the message to Smets was to up his pace, as the Belgian was closing fast and had a chance of catching his rival. Having taken the race lead, Smets suffered more bike problems as the misfire returned. The Belgian's bike struggled to get him to the top of Hawkstone's steep hill. That left Johansson back in the lead, even if he nearly fell off in the whoops. Demaria also benefited from Smets' problems as the Frenchman moved up into second spot. Smets' bike eventually ground to a halt. As other riders went by, the world champion finally fired his bike back into life. But the race winner disappeared and Smets had no appetite to rejoin the action. He pulled into the pits, but his team insisted that he at least try and salvage a few points. So the Belgian went back out into the race. Even if his bike was barely capable of carrying the world champion up the Hawkstone hill. Burnham had passed Herring and moved up to third, which would make him the first British rider in the race. The Swedish fans were out in force to cheer Johansson as he crossed the line as winner, and 20 points closer to the championship leader Bartolini. A dejected Smets was next over the line, but he was a lap behind Johansson and was nearly lapped by Demaria as well. Burnham was the third rider home and was clearly delighted with finishing on the podium in his home Grand Prix. Herring just held off Parker in a battle for fourth. Johansson was able to celebrate the race win. But a win in race 2 was probably more than he could hope for. Unless he could turn his whole shot into a victory. One good thing for Johansson, he had teammate King in second place. The KTM duo were looking good at the end of the first lap. Demaria and Bartolini were well placed, and Smets was also in the top 5, but the British riders weren't doing so well. With Johansson and King at the front, the following riders needed to do something quickly if the race wasn't to turn into something of a KTM benefit. There looked little anyone could do to stop this duo from further enhancing the reputation of KTM's four-stroke, unless Smets could force his way past Bartolini and Demaria and present a challenge to the leaders. And that's exactly what the world champion did, as he displaced both Bartolini and Demaria to take over third place. The Frenchman still looked strong, but Bartolini was starting to come under pressure from teammate Puzar. Was there something wrong with Bartolini? Things were looking good for Smets when he eventually wore down Johansson and King. But his hopes of winning this race were still dependent on the bike making it to the finish, something even the 3-time world champion couldn't guarantee. King, whose brother Darrell was sidelined with a cracked vertebrae from his crashes in Germany, has settled into third. Demaria was looking comfortable in fourth, but Puzar had taken over from Bartolini in fifth. The World Championship leader was set to lose even more places. Max Bartolini, no relation to Andrea, and Willy van Vessel were the next riders through. Bartolini was later found to be suffering from a blood disorder. Smets' problem was more of a mechanical one. His Husaberg ground to a halt in almost the same spot as in the first race, and he was left trying to kick the machine back into life. That meant a second race win for Johansson. But nothing for Smets as King and Demaria went past his stricken machine. Even when the Husaberg fired back into life, Puzar was the next rider waiting to make the most of his unexpected chance. It was more than Johansson could have hoped for as he crossed the line for his second race win of the day. It was a double celebration for the KTM team as King was the next rider home. Team manager Kurt Nickel joined in the celebrations, pouring champagne over his riders on KTM's best day of the season. That was in stark contrast to Smets, who limped home on the stricken Husaberg. What a great day for Johansson and the KTM four-stroke. A maximum 40 points for the Swedish rider at Hawkstone Park was a perfect return, giving him the overall win ahead of Demaria. Bartolini's lead had been cut to 11 points. Johansson was looking for more victories in round 7 at Lučenec in Slovakia, but the course with its high-speed uphills and downhills worried several riders.
Actually, I thought it should be a little bit faster because you have really long straight, but it's so slippery in the corner, so you don't really get the same speed up on the straight what I thought. But still, it's for me, I mean, I never been riding a faster track than this one.
Johansson and the KTM looked up to the challenge.
I think it's going to be between Andrea and De Maria who's going to take the title this year.
But what was behind Bartolini's poor showing at Hawkstone?
First moto, it was going very good, even if Hawkstone Park, as everybody knows, is not suitable track for him because a little bit sandy. But it was going very good. He was second behind Johansson, far away from Smets. But unfortunately, he made a small mistake and the bike stops. And he was not able to let him start again.
Smets was another rider looking to get his title challenge back on course after his Hawkstone disaster. Mechanical problems had robbed the Belgian of 2 certain victories at the British Grand Prix. A podium finish at Hawkstone had given British rider Burnham a new heart. But the race would be between Bartolini, Smets and Johansson. With the result of the World Championship to be decided, there was a lot of pressure. All 3 of them needed a good start in Slovakia, and none featured in the first race whole shot. That honour went to Austrian rider Erwin Mattlinger on a Honda. But when he drifted wide in the first corner, it was Belgian rider Johan Boonen on a Husqvarna who took over the lead. With large clouds of dust being thrown up, it was clear the riders were going to have a difficult time of it in what were far from perfect racing conditions. By the end of lap 1, Mattlinger was back in front. An inside pass by Boonen put the Belgian rider back in the number 1 spot. As he exited a turn, he caught Mattlinger's front wheel, and the Austrian went down, costing him several places. Alex Pizarro had been up with Boonen off the start, but a fall meant the Italian was back in the pack by the time he came to complete his first lap of the course. Thick dust showed the organisers hadn't prepared the track properly. Boonen's time at the front of the field was short-lived. Shane King took the outside line down one of the long hills to make his pass. This time it looked like the pass would be permanent. King was giving it everything, but he had teammate Johansson right behind him, even if the Swede looked barely in control. That wasn't going to stop King as he made the most of having a clear track in front of him. However, he had little time to relax as Johansson was poised to make a move when the chance came. Bartolini had worked his way up to 3rd, but Smets was right behind him as the race began to take on a familiar look. It was almost a repeat of the last Grand Prix, with Johansson taking over the lead from King to head a KTM 1-2. Bartolini was clearly looking fitter than he had at Hawkstone, but was unable to repel the attack of Smets. But at this stage in the season, the Italian knew that scoring points was all that mattered, so he didn't try to fight back straight away. Demaria had started to work his way to the front and easily dealt with Boonen. Having passed King, Johansson was starting to pull away and build himself a lead. The New Zealander had dropped back and was now in the clutches of Smets. It wasn't long before Smets made his move on King, outbraking the New Zealander into a corner to claim 2nd place. Now all he needed was for his bike to last the race. First, he needed to get away from King as the former world champion started to fight back. But when King tried to go on the inside through a corner, he lost his front wheel and slipped off. That mistake allowed Bartolini to go third and meant King had gone from second to fourth in a few corners. At least KTM still had the lead in the race, with Johansson making his break as the riders behind him fought over second place. The battle for second place was starting to heat up as Bartolini came back at Smets. The Belgian found himself to be a surprise winner of the race, following a dramatic finish. Almost unbelievably, leader Johansson had crashed 3 corners from the finish to allow Smets and Bartolini to go by. Johansson was consumed with rage. Smets was a very relieved man because his bike had again been in trouble. The same old misfire made it difficult for him to get around the track.
Right from the beginning, I couldn't make it uphill.
Perhaps Johansson would make up for his first race mishap by taking the race 2 hole shot, and with it the victory. Mattlinger showed that his first race hole shot was no fluke, as he again took the lead, even if he drifted wide once more. Track watering between the races made some of the corners slippy, and Mattlinger's good start came to nothing in turn 2. Demaria escaped the drama, but several other riders were not so lucky. Demaria looked to have made a successful breakaway, as none of the other top riders were close. But when he also slid off in a corner, it handed the lead to Bernd Eckenbach. The German's hold on first place didn't look too solid, with Demaria leading the chasing group of riders who were trying to displace Eckenbach. The Frenchman was again showing the sort of form he had in his home Grand Prix. What a pity inconsistency had cost him so many points since then. Since moving up from the 250 class, Demaria hadn't shown too much evidence of his skill. That was about to change here. Eckenbach also looked likely to lose second place as King was about to make his move. The New Zealander quickly made his way through, and he had no time to waste as Smets was the next rider to execute a passing move on Eckenbach. Johansson was trying to come through the field, but was running out of time. The race win was going to go to one of the first 3. Demaria was looking the favourite ahead of King and Smets. Things hadn't gone too smoothly for Bartolini, but he soon had Eckenbach in his sights. Another rider trying to make up for a less than perfect start was Burnham. It was significant to the title race that Johansson was behind Demaria and Bartolini, and that was good for both of them. Demaria wasn't going to be denied this race win. The reward for Smets' hard work was second place in the race and the overall victory in the Grand Prix, and he was clearly delighted. King was third and set for another visit to the podium. Second race winner Demaria had earned a kiss from his girlfriend, but Johansson had little reason to celebrate. So Smets took the overall victory by 5 points from Bartolini, but the Italian again showed the consistency that makes champions. The Belgian fans were out in force at Namur. They were hoping Smets could win on home soil and knock the Italian off the top of the World Championship table. But problems with his bike in qualifying had left Smets very unhappy. The world champion had threatened not to ride in the second race if his bike suffered any more engine troubles in the first moto. There were more immediate problems to worry about as the pack roared into the first corner. British rider James Marsh crashed and took several riders down with him. Included in the pile-up were Burnham and former champion King. Puzar had steered clear of the trouble and was the early race leader ahead of Smets. At least the Belgian fans would be happy, but what of championship leader Bartolini? When several riders piled into each other in a corner, Bartolini was forced to wait for the blockage to clear. That was when the Italian's problems really started. His bike got caught up on another rider's machine and was trapped underneath. It took the help of another rider to lift Bartolini's bike clear. Although he'd lost valuable time in the incident, Bartolini kept a cool head and set about limiting the damage to his championship lead. The Belgian fans obviously thought his problems were something to celebrate. Puzar still held the lead, but his anxious glance back at Smets showed he wasn't confident of staying there. With Bartolini so far back, the next riders to look out for were Johansson and Demaria, and they were both in the top 10. Battles were raging further down the field at this historic venue, with Burnham showing the sort of commitment that was needed. Smets had made short work of getting past Puzar, and Johansson was lined up as the next rider to go by. The Swedish rider quickly went to the front after reversing the roles on both Smets and Puzar. Demaria had failed to make any progress and was still stuck behind the determined Trampas Parker. King had made up some of the lost ground following his first turn crash and was closing in on Herring amongst other riders. Bartolini had also recovered well, but the Italian still had a lot of work to do to get in a point-scoring position. When Smets was forced out with a bent gear lever, it meant that Puzar was back up to second. With his lead growing all the time, Johansson just needed to finish to win and pick up 20 points. With Bartolini having to fight his way through, it meant Johansson would be closing the points gap. Puzar's hopes of hanging on to second place were coming under severe pressure from Willy van Vessel and Miska Aaltonen. The KTM rider showed he'd got great skill in the woods, perfected during winter enduro races in his native Sweden. Van Vessel moved clear into second place. Demaria was forced out when his bike's rear shock collapsed. So Johansson was the clear winner of the race and was joined by his team in the celebrations. Van Vessel was second less than 2 weeks after the death of his father. Demaria had decided to sit out race 2 because of an injury suffered in qualifying. Johansson was one of the first to show, and Bartolini was lucky to force his way inside another first corner crash. Marsh was once more involved, but the rider who suffered most was Herring, as he took a long time to recover. King had taken over as the early race leader, but he was joined by teammate Johansson. Bartolini also figured in the top 6, but there was no sign of Smets. A poor start meant the Belgian had a lot of work to do and would need all the support his fans could give him. King had announced that he was to race for KTM in America next season, so winning a race at Namur would be a fitting way for him to go out. Johansson would settle for second after his first race win, but he had to watch out as Van Vessel and Bartolini were closing in. King had no such concerns as he guided his KTM around Namur on his way to an impressive win. The New Zealander would certainly be a big loss to 500s next season. Johansson had more immediate worries as an engine problem slowed his bike, and Bartolini, now up to second, was getting closer. King was left clear to celebrate a race win, which was popular with a Belgian crowd. Johansson's problems meant Bartolini took over second. Van Vessel moved up to third as Johansson was forced to coast over the line. His engine had failed on the home straight and he only just made it. A disappointed Johansson still took the overall win.
Yeah, 4 laps before finish, the power just disappeared and really strange noise from the engine. So I slowed down and then Willy van Vessel crashed on the last lap and I did one try up here in the last corner. But then the bike just stopped, so I had to roll in over the finish line, so I was lucky.
Johansson was a popular winner as many Swedish fans were at the race. Johansson's victory earned him 10 more points than championship rival Bartolini, with Demaria failing to pick up a point. But Bartolini held a 40-point lead over the Swede, who'd taken over second spot from Demaria. Round 10 saw the action move on to Ettelbruck in Luxembourg. Smets was dressed in the all-new white riding kit. It would take more than that, nothing short of a miracle, to make him champion again. Although Smets featured in the dash to the first corner, he could do nothing when Bartolini snatched the advantage from him as they exited the turn. The Italian knew that victory in Luxembourg would mean a big step towards his first world title. Smets was doing his best to stop that, but title rival Johansson was struggling after a bad start. Smets was right behind Bartolini and was favourite to take over the lead at this point. The Italian wasn't going to give in easily, as he knew every World Championship point was vital at this stage. But Smets kept probing at every opportunity, knowing that each corner presented him with a chance to make a pass or force a mistake. Then Smets found the opening he needed and cut to the inside to make a clean pass on Bartolini. Bartolini knew that second would be good enough. With Eckenbach in third, the Italian was in little danger of losing another place. Any problems that Smets had would hand the lead back to Bartolini. Parker was fighting his own battle with German Jochen Jasinski, who was having his best race of the year and featured in front of both Pizar and Aaltonen. Parker wasn't having a great day and was coming under threat from Jasinski. The KTM rider was hanging on grimly, but left the way open for the German to make his move. He needed no second invitation to claim Parker's place. With Bartolini in the leading duo, Johansson needed to make rapid progress, but first he had to deal with Demaria. The Frenchman had seen his title hopes disappear at Namur. He needed to pick up his pace here in Luxembourg if he had any hope of keeping Johansson at bay. The Swedish rider was looking for a way past and eventually found it in the dust on the outside of a corner. With less than 10 minutes to go, Smets was struck another cruel blow. The mechanical problems had returned. That meant Bartolini found himself back in the lead, and he was going to make the most of his chance. The Italian fans could hardly believe it as their hero raced his way to another victory. Meanwhile, Smets had to walk back to the pits as Johansson went by. Bartolini had taken a giant step towards his first world title with an unexpected race win here in Luxembourg. Eckenbach finished second, with a fast-finishing Johansson just taking away third from Spaniard Garcia Vico on the final lap of the race. The second race provided Smets with a chance to make up for his first race disaster. A good start would be of vital importance, but this time Pizar and Bartolini led a Yamaha 1-2 as the racers disappeared in the choking dust. Whether Pizar had obeyed team orders or not, Bartolini was soon to find himself in front. That was just what the championship leader wanted to see, with his teammate barring the way for his title rivals. Smets was stuck outside the top 10 and had plenty of work to do. The Italian maintained their formation, but as the rest of the riders came into view, Smets was starting to make forward progress. Pizar lost second place to Eckenbach, but the time it had taken the German to get past had allowed Bartolini to pull away. Pizar was coming under more pressure as Smets was closing in on him and Jasinski. The German was the first to feel the pressure of the world champions pushed to the front as the Husaberg rider powered through. But Jasinski fought back and Smets again found himself in fifth place. That meant he had to pass the German all over again. This time he made the pass stick and also got by Pizar at the same time as the Italian drifted wide through a corner. When Smets passed Eckenbach, it meant the Belgian had moved up to second place. That was well received by the many Belgian fans who made the short trip to Luxembourg for the race. Johansson was again trying to make up for a poor start to the race, but making a good job of it. The Swede was picking up positions on every lap. Here we see him cutting inside Burnham. That left Burnham open to attack from fellow Briton Herring, who was trying to follow Johansson through. With Johansson showing the way, it looked like Herring would reverse the roles over Burnham from their Hawkstone battle. Herring won this time when he passed Burnham on an uphill jump. Bartolini was left in the clear when Smets again pulled out. Another race win for the Italian on what turned out to be a perfect day for his title hopes. And that was to the delight of the Italian fans. Garcia Vico came through to take second ahead of Jasinski, giving the Spaniard cause for celebration. So there's the confirmation of Bartolini's double win and of Garcia Vico's second place overall. That meant Bartolini was within striking distance of his first world title. Uddevalla in Sweden was the venue of round 10 of the championship, where the home fans would be right behind Johansson, all hoping the Swedish rider would take a double race victory. So the stage was set for a dramatic encounter. As the gate dropped, the rider who could force his way to the front would be best placed to take race victory. Bartolini showed how much the world title meant to him with a forceful start. Smets and Johansson had to swerve to avoid colliding with the Italian. De Maria made the most of the drama to lead the race, with Bartolini and Johansson some way back. The Frenchman held the early lead and looked in good form for his third race win, but Smets and Bartolini were closing in on the leader. Johansson wasn't figuring in the leading group of riders, and that must have suited Bartolini. Garcia Vico retired after a crash. Smets had fought his way through to second, and now he held the advantage over Burnham, but Bartolini was closing in. Johansson was finding it hard to make progress and would need to pass Trampas Parker. Never an easy proposition. De Maria had pulled clear and looked set to record a victory. Unless the following riders could catch him up. And that's just what Smets had in mind as he closed in. Johansson had found a way past Parker, but the Swedish rider was still a long way off the leaders. Bartolini was going about the job of adding to his points total, but there was no time for the Italian rider to relax, as danger wasn't too far behind. Johansson had picked up more places and was closing the gap on the championship leader, but could he get close enough to pass? King's race ended when he was forced out. Smets had taken over from De Maria and had his heart set on winning the race. Van Vessel had crashed off one of the jumps and ended up on a different part of the track. He was clearly frustrated. Burnham wanted to repeat his Hawkstone heroics, and the British rider found his way past early race leader De Maria. Bartolini had moved into fourth place and was all out on his own, but the Swedish fans sensed that there was a chance for Johansson to close the gap. First he had to get past Herring, and he did that with a pass around the outside of the British rider. Burnham's grip on second place didn't look too firm, particularly when Bartolini went past De Maria and into third. But Bartolini needed to make rapid progress as Johansson was closing the gap even more, bringing a noisy response from the crowd. Fabers retired after a big crash. Smets celebrated victory in typical fashion, but there was no time for Burnham to follow suit. The Honda rider crossed the line flat out as he knew Bartolini was right behind him. But third place wasn't a bad result for the Italian, as he'd managed to beat Johansson. Race 2 got underway with Bartolini again swerving across several riders as he went for the lead. The Italian didn't cause any accidents, but there was a first corner pile-up which had Shane King at the bottom of it. Bartolini held the lead at the end of the first lap, but he had Johansson right behind him. The Italian knew that this was probably going to be the toughest race of the season, with the Swedish rider poised to make a pass at any time. But then Johansson handed the advantage back when he slipped off in a corner. For what looked like an eternity, Johansson struggled to lift his machine off the ground and pushed it around the next corner. Eventually, he kicked the engine back into life. The Yamaha team couldn't believe it as they cheered Bartolini on. With Aaltonen and Buzard behind him, Bartolini was well placed to win the race. Buzard looked capable of making it a double celebration for the team. With his forceful style, he pursued Aaltonen. De Maria went out after crashing with another rider. Burnham was battling to hold off Herring, who was having his own problems staying in front of Smets. To keep his title hopes alive, Johansson had to close the gap between himself and Smets. With the lead he held, nothing looked capable of stopping Bartolini's charge to a very important victory. Pizarre was the meat in a British sandwich as he was passed by Burnham, but also had Herring right behind him. The Italian looked to be drifting slowly down the field. Aaltonen was leading a large group of riders, but all of the attention was focused at the back, where Smets was now locked in a fierce battle with Johansson. This battle had taken Smets and Johansson past Herring and was putting Puzard under even more pressure. When Johansson got past Smets, at least the damage to his title hopes wasn't going to be too severe. Bartolini crossed the line first, but Johansson eased up too early, and Smets was able to blast past and snatch back second place. That meant Smets was the overall winner on the day. Smets had made up for some of his earlier problems as his bike was at least starting to run like it should. Bartolini had taken more points than his rival Johansson. That meant the Italian could win the title at the next round. Kavola in Finland staged the penultimate round of the championship, where a nervous Bartolini would probably be crowned king.
Everybody feel more close to the title, but of course you cannot trust always the good performance that he had since today. So especially here, it is a quite difficult track, quite strange, especially not suitable for him, and he must pay attention.
But even heavy overnight rain wasn't going to stop Bartolini. For surely he'd score enough points to win the title here in Finland. There was to be more drama before the title was decided. Several start gates didn't drop, and that left a number of riders stranded on the line. That was bad news for Johansson, who'd been one of the leaders. Only for the race officials to order the race to be restarted. This time, everyone got away cleanly, but the start didn't work out for Johansson as well as it had the first time. Bartolini led the field through the first two corners, and with Finnish rider Miska Aaltonen right behind him, there looked little chance of Johansson stopping the Italian's title charge. A good finish in this race would secure the World Championship for Bartolini. Aaltonen had his say as he took over the lead, but that shouldn't have bothered the Italian too much. But Bartolini started to get nervous, and that's when the mistakes came. Even so, losing places to Willy van Vessel and Smets didn't do his title hopes that much harm. Aaltonen held the lead for most of the race and was on course for a home victory despite the best efforts of Van Vessel. The Finnish rider had no time to relax as both Van Vessel and Smets were close enough should he make a mistake. Aaltonen held on for the race win and Smets made a successful late bid for second place. Van Vessel came home third, but everyone was waiting for Bartolini to cross the line. Fourth was good enough to give the Italian his first World Championship. The Italian's team and fans were on hand to help him celebrate, mobbing him as he crossed the finish line. The new champion was lifted shoulder high as the celebrations got underway. With the #1 plate from Smets' bike, it was time for the new champion to receive the congratulations from his team. They saluted him with a noisy round of cheering. With the start of Heat 2, it was work as usual for Bartolini. Instead of taking it easy, the new champion went out and hole-shot the second race, which saw several riders fighting after a Turn 2 collision. What better way for Bartolini to celebrate than by winning the second race? With Johansson showing little fight, there seemed to be nothing to stop the Italian. All he had to do was pick his way round the course and the race win would be his. Aaltonen was again riding well, but was unlikely to repeat his first race victory. King was doing his best to take second away from the Finnish rider. It all looked too easy for the new world champion. Johansson made steady progress and finally made his way past teammate King, which was of little consolation. Bartolini took the checkered flag to celebrate his title in style, showing he really was a worthy world champion.
Yes, because I start not for winner, but after the first lap I think, too relaxed and very good feeling in the bike, and every lap I take 2 seconds every lap, and after 20 minutes I have 15 seconds, and I think, okay, it's possible winner. But second did very nice.
And mentally you feel good? It's relief to ride now knowing you are champion.
Yeah, now I start thinking #1 because yes, but I think tomorrow is better.
Congratulations on a great day.
Yes, very hard day, but I think tonight very good sleeping.
Congratulations, Andrea.
Thank you. Bye.
The world's new #1. Victory in the second race also gave Bartolini the overall win over Aaltonen, with King third ahead of Johansson and Smets. But what was more important to Bartolini was the fact that he was already world champion with 1 round to go. And that final round was at Lierop in Holland, where Smets would be looking to win. Bartolini had already won the title, but that didn't mean he wouldn't be trying his best in Holland. But he couldn't be blamed for not featuring at the front as the pack swept through the first turn. Belgian rider Johan Boonen led the field from wildcard rider Remy van Ries and Smets. The lead changed hands several times, with Van Vessel holding the advantage from Van Ries and Smets. Van Vessel was a popular winner at his home Grand Prix. He was lucky to win as his bike was running out of fuel just as he crossed the line. Bartolini had come back from a crash in race 1 to secure the manufacturer's title for Yamaha. A hole shot meant the Italian was the early leader in race 2. It was no surprise when Smets took over the race lead. King took over in second spot, and Bartolini also found himself under attack from Van Vessel. Jasinski and Estonian Avo Leok were also close. Nothing looked capable of stopping Smets, who made it all seem just too easy. The race win was a fitting way for Smets to end his reign as world number 1. Second for Van Vessel meant he just lost the overall win to Smets on the tiebreak. The Italian fans had made the trip to Holland to make sure that the new world champion Bartolini could celebrate some more. So Smets and Van Vessel shared race wins, and Jasinski took third overall with his second race result. But Bartolini had again ridden well. Fourth overall had increased his final championship lead to a massive 73.